Okay, so we're going to get started, everyone. Welcome. We're continuing our afternoon of programming on the higher ed track. This is Georgy Cohen, who's been working as a digital strategist in the higher ed space and other mission-driven organization space for 20 years. You've probably seen her at a lot of conferences. You're probably more familiar with her than I am, but I did try to get to know her a bit before the session, so I did get some really interesting facts that you probably didn't know. So I have all the secret tidbits. So she's an old school internet geek who got her startup on dial-up BBSEs and Usenet, working on command line and using text-based tools like Pine, Pin, and Links. So she is a nerd at heart, like a lot of us, and also a little nerdy. She has 4 pets. They're all named after fictional TV film characters, so I have to actually look at their names though. But 3 cats, I also have 3 cats, Truman, Scooter, and Gonzo, and then she has a dog called Frodo, and nothing nerdier than Lord of the Rings, so, and The Hobbit. So without further ado, Georgy Cohen, buttons on. We're good to go.
Awesome. Fantastic. The most stressful part of this was that I was going to have to press this red button, and I'm past 10 minutes I've been like, oh my god, I'm going to forget to press the red button. Thank the Lord, someone else came and pressed the red button for me, so we're good. The rest of this is super, super chill. Thank you all for coming to my talk and being here in the higher ed track. My talk is called Bigger Than a Breadbox, Thinking Beyond the Redesign. And it's kind of an older expression, but I think it's still in the popular vernacular. So this guy is Steve Allen, and he's the one who popularized the expression bigger than a breadbox. He was a comedian in the 50s and 60s, and he was a frequent participant in a game show called What's My Line? And game shows, clearly like Love Island or God knows what, but back then it was like, why don't you guess what job this person has? It was like super low-key. So one of the things, they would try to guess like the thing that the person works with, and the line that he became famous for using was, well, is it bigger than a breadbox? So that phrase kind of entered the popular vernacular as sort of like a standard of comparison, right? I have this saying, well, it's bigger than a breadbox. So in our industry, the breadbox has for years been the higher ed. This is a little washed out here. Has been the higher ed website redesign, right? Like that's been kind of the thing where I've worked in higher ed for 10 years in-house, and I worked agency side for 11 years. So I've been part of many website redesign projects. And, it's been, for years, it's been kind of like the language of digital transformation. It's like, we build it, it lasts for some period of time, we rebuild it, raise it down, build it back up. But, so that's been the standard, that's been the breadbox of digital transformation. And you really think about it, and it's just like, it's a little bird. A website in that context is a little bird. It's beautiful, it can do certain things, it's a delight. But when you think about it, a bird does not exist in a vacuum, right? A bird is part of an ecosystem. And the bird would not survive without the fish and the bear and the sun and the rain and the volcano, apparently. All these things are interdependent. They all work together to help each other thrive. And that's what an ecosystem is. And I think that concept of an ecosystem in the environment translates to how I think about a digital ecosystem in higher ed. So I'm going to start unpacking what I mean by that, and I'm going to share some new thoughts about some very old problems. So first I want to cut live to a view of the higher ed landscape right now. It's tough. We're all having a tough go here right now, but let's narrow it down a little bit from the industry at large to the .edu landscape. So something that most of us are probably dealing with every day in some fashion. So taking a look at the .edu landscape, websites are sprawling and more disorganized. I'm going to talk a little bit later about this concept of content debt, which so many organizations, higher ed included, has been accumulating over time. And the more you accumulate, the harder it is to pay down. Organizations are more complex. Not only do you have universities with colleges and schools and departments and institutes, and you have admissions, and you have advancement. Now we have mergers. Now we have all these other sort of complications that are happening across the higher ed landscape that are just making these organizations trickier to manage. Teams are, as we know, under-resourced and or under-skilled. One of the things that makes me the most mad is that 20 or 30 years ago, some vice president decided not to train graphic designers in CSS and HTML. And here we are today, where we have people who, it's kind of a simplistic way to put it, but because the web has been so sort of undervalued, oh, it's like a little cute thing over here, cut to 2025, it's not a little cute thing, it's a big deal, but the skill disparity persists because of the lack of foresight years and years back. And we know how higher ed goes, right? It would have been helpful for someone to have that foresight some years ago. Data is so incredibly valuable, as we all know, but we're doing a poor job of collecting data, and not just collecting it, but applying it to use it as business intelligence for the organization. Brand integrity is in danger. So there's a lot of ways that this happens, but one of which being, if you have these sprawling, disorganized websites across complex organizations and a team that's poorly skilled to really manage it, your brand that you might have spent $500,000 or more on developing is not going to have a strong, solid platform or foundation from which to really communicate it or activate it. And then, of course, everyone's favorite, the silos. The teams are siloed, the data sources are siloed, the platforms are siloed. This website and that microsite and this platform over here, never the twain shall meet, right? It's hard. So here's like a visualization of how this might play out. You have like your main.edu, like www.college.edu. Then you have school, college, and department sites. Maybe these are all managed independently. Maybe they are sort of building off of a shared platform. Maybe they're sort of just subdirectories of the main.edu. Who knows? It could vary. Who knows who made that decision way back when? Have we revisited that decision? Microsites and landing pages, so a little archipelago sort of drifting off the main.edu of various sites. So that's just websites. We also have data sources, and I'll call it / third-party apps, course catalogs, faculty databases, email platforms, event calendars. God, I could do a whole day about event calendars, what a nightmare they are. Catalogs, systems of record, CRM, student information systems, ERPs. There's so much out there, and all of this has value. All of this is important. We're not saying like get rid of X or get rid of Y. All of it is important, but we undercut our ability to get the most out of that, the value of these platforms, and really just get the most out of that importance by having these all be disconnected, not influencing one another, not connected to one another. So a website redesign ends up being lipstick on a pig, right? You have that main.edu, and if we're not thinking about that whole other network, that landscape, that ecosystem of other entities, upon which, whether we realize it or not, the success of all these platforms are interdependent, then we just kind of, we made it one bird look kind of pretty. I found this editorial cartoon, which actually is about like South African politics, but I adapted it because this feels like a lot of like website redesign committees. Deck chair rearrangement working group. Are you ready? We're just going down the ship here. So what are the outcomes of this sort of fractured landscape? You have redundant CMSs and platforms. Decision making is confused. Ownership is confused. You have an inconsistent user experience. Weakened brand integrity. SEO cannibalization. If you have a department or a program over here that's being managed by one person, and you have your main site over here that also has representation of that program, plus the catalog is floating around over here with another representation of that program, what's happening? What is the canonical source of your program? And are you just throwing money in a pit when you're trying to optimize around it? Again, ineffective user collection of data, organizational and cost inefficiency. This is really the crux of it in my mind. There's so much money being wasted on duplicate apps, inefficient processes, duplicate redundant CMS platforms, all these things. I feel like if there was a financial audit done on a lot of institutions, you find a lot of waste, also a lot of missed opportunities. Disconnection from institutional goals. Everything's kind of sprawled out. It's really hard to tether it centrally. And inefficient content publishing. So you're going to have stories and content being created that might be redundant, One professor gets interviewed 3 times by 3 different publications. Those types of issues which, are going to, over time, kind of degrade the digital experience. So what do we need to do? We need a more cohesive, efficient, interconnected .edu approach to effectively and consistently convey our value proposition and support the institutional goals. So how do we start thinking about getting there? I think, so design thinking, the concept of design thinking has been very prominent in recent years, and it's done a lot of good. It's been a good framework for improving user experience and how we think about digital solutions. But I think that this problem calls for more of a systems thinking approach, to really think more analytically, in a more holistic way. Think more about the relationships between different entities. In a recent Harvard Business Review article, the authors wrote that systems thinking recognizes and embraces the complexity of organizational problems, rather than seeking to simplify them. So these big, hairy challenges that I've laid out, that we've been reckoning with, we're not going to solve them by just tidying up and polishing our corner of things. The advice, when I, leading my team, when I was at OHO, the thing that I always had as our charge was to lean into the squish. That the only way out is through. So we had to really dive in to these messy problems in order to truly understand them and begin to identify the best way to, bit by bit, begin to chip away at them. So when I was thinking for a model of how to think about this, I actually started thinking about campus master plans. And I worked at 2 different colleges, and I was always impressed by, just as an outside observer, the idea of a campus master plan. Like, they know what's going on. They know that in about 3 years that dorm's going to get renovated. They know that we're going to need to improve these facilities because they're out of date. There's a plan, right? It's there. So I was like, that's really, really fascinating. I feel like we do not have that with digital. Things just happen or they don't happen, and there's little rhyme or reason to it. So I actually did a bunch of research and looked at a bunch of campus master plans, and here are the key elements that I saw. Alignment to institutional values and strategic plan, sets vision and goals for the future. A lot of these are living documents. They're sort of updated and adjusted over time. They're available to be viewed by all. They involve institutional stakeholders in the creation, not just one person in a room deciding what's what. I found this phrase in a couple of them. The goal is to sustain an architecture of care, which I think is a really interesting phrase that I think that we could all take a lot from. They consider the interconnectedness of elements of the built environment. And you think about the work that we're doing, we're also kind of creating a built environment. And it considers how the environment supports the needs of the community. Honestly, you could just cover up this, or just cross this out, write digital, and it would sound pretty good, right? It would sound like some good principles to guide our work. So when I think about digital master planning, these are some of the key objectives that I think we should be considering. Asserting the critical value of digital platforms in supporting the business of the institution. Centering data and measurement to guide decision-making and ongoing iteration while we gauge our outcomes. Aligning digital platforms to serve strategic priorities supported by an appropriately skilled and staffed team. Making up ground from years of digital evaluation and deprioritization. Maintaining currency and relevance while being prepared for changes we can't yet predict. Be efficient stewards with limited resources to yield greatest impact. And my favorite, clarifying ownership and decision-making for digital entities via comprehensive governance. These are the things that I think that a digital master plan should really serve to do. This kind of sounds like a call to action, and it kind of is. But of course, as we think about this, going that route and sort of trying to sort of bring some coherence and cohesiveness to this might mean overhauling your cultural landscape, the cultural landscape of how you function as a digital publishing community, how that ecosystem is currently organized, and how the people within it are structured or not structured to work together and do their job. So I tried to create kind of a maturity matrix to identify, well, where are we at and where do we want to go? So I have one axis here, which is outcomes. So really working towards short-term outcomes or long-range outcomes, and scale. Is it really just affecting my unit, my chemistry department, or are we really affecting impact at an enterprise level scale? So on the lower end of the matrix here, we have product. So really just focus on creating standalone artifacts. I have my chemistry department newsletter, for example. That is a product. Process means that we're going a little further down each axis. We can sustain the ongoing creation of artifacts with the design process, but there are still silos, those persist. If we think in a more platform approach, we're able to implement large digital tools and platforms and achieve some coordination across the ecosystem, but there are still some disconnects. It's not fully perfect. But having sort of a plan means that the publishing processes and platforms are coordinated across the institution. So as we think about achieving enterprise level scale, scaling at an enterprise level and having outcomes that are really going to have long range impact on the institution, it's thinking less about the product and more about the plan and being proactive and thinking about how these elements all work together. Cool story, bro. So what now? That was a lot of like Gartner-esque stuff. So no more matrices. We're going to talk about some things that we can actually do. And the thing that I always say, because I always talk about these big hairy challenges, and it's like, let's change the world. Everybody go, good talk. But my belief is that if you do one thing better, take one process, one little corner of the things that you're responsible for and make it better, that's awesome. That's great. You don't have to feel like you have to swallow the ocean. Making a little incremental change to one piece of it is a positive step forward. And then using that as a launch pad for the next change and the next change. So the most fundamental thing that I think is important to do is to map out the landscape. So think about that graphic that I showed with all the different websites and data sources and all these things. I think sometimes, you might have seen this like when you're doing like a content audit. A lot of people just don't realize how much content is on their website. So take that writ large, like what are the different systems, sites, data sources, databases, third-party applications, what is out there? Begin mapping that out, listing it out, identifying where systems are connected, where they're not, where they should be, where they shouldn't be, what things seem duplicative, right? So beginning to sort of first just inventory and then assess and be like, this makes sense, this doesn't, this feels like a missed opportunity, I don't know what this is, right? And then you have a lot of questions and sort of direction to sort of have more conversations and maybe think about some priorities. I mentioned content debt earlier. I think one of the most important things that we can do to sort of help sort of tame that digital ecosystem and create more unity around it is to start paying down that content debt. What has caused that content debt? Lack of structure, governance, resourcing, or strategy over time. The result has been redundant, outdated, poor, inaccurate, or non-compliant content, overuse of resources, poor usability and findability, and degraded brand credibility. So I don't want to say that the solution to all of our problems is a content audit, but it's a start. But really beginning to identify, and this kind of goes in parallel with that mapping out the landscape piece, it's just identifying what is the content that's out there that is, especially with, thinking about AI and AI visibility, right? How much sort of poor information is still out there for all these systems to be consulting and creating and yielding answers to inquiries. So there's a lot of ways that approaching how we think about our content then, beginning to pay that down is going to pay dividends for the efficiency of our organization, to create a better search experience for people using AI tools, etc. Evaluating the user experience. So doing things like understanding your customer journey can really help provide a strong strategic layer for thinking about what you need to do with that digital ecosystem. So think about that landscape, all these different tools and applications. Now think about a customer journey. Think about a prospective international student. Think about a prospective MBA student. Think about an alum, right? So what are they trying to do? What are the systems and sites and content that's relevant to that journey? Where is it working now and where is it broken? I think understanding that customer journey is a really helpful lens to think about where to sort of create more cohesion and efficiency in that digital ecosystem. I can't get through a presentation without talking about governance. Understanding your governance model and making sure that it's working for you in the way that you want and need to publish is so critically important. There's no one right way to do it. The only right way to do it is the one that makes sense for your organization. So do you/can you be centralized, decentralized, or somewhere in between? What are the roles and responsibilities and workflow for your web publishing? Do you have sufficient training and documentation for folks? Do you have sort of ongoing content quality assurance process for ongoing auditing and review of content? How are website update requests managed? That's another topic. I could probably talk for 3 hours just about website update request forms. It's one of those sort of bottleneck points where, if you don't have a strong governance around that sort of entry point, it can just become sort of a floodgate for all sorts of random requests that then you end up being a firefighter and not a strategic communicator. How is CMS access governed? Who's managing internal columns? Do you need certain policies defined around, say, stopping admissions for buying yet another random application or a random virtual tour app that you then have to implement? Content planning and operations. What's the process for deciding what stories you're going to publish, how you're going to distribute them? Assessing organizational efficiency. So again, thinking about the roles on your team, the skills, the functions, how people work together. This isn't about like, oh, this person should be fired or whatever. It's more like we have a bunch of smart people. How can we use them most optimally to support what we're trying to do? Where are their knowledge gaps? Where are their sort of breakdowns in the workflow? How can we improve that? Again, identifying data integration opportunities. So really thinking about the organizational intelligence that smart data collection application can yield for your institution. So thinking about analytics across different platforms. Thinking about how we're having marketing automation, CRM data integrated into that. There's a lot of opportunity there, and a lot of institutions are thinking about it strategically. Internal partnerships. 2 I want to highlight. 1, IT definitely needs to be part of the conversation, but I also want to mention procurement, because procurement, is, I feel like it's a bunch of people in robes in a secret room, and I don't really know what happens in that room. I don't kind of really want to know. But what I do know is that sometimes you have institutions where an office will buy a thing because they have the budget to buy a thing, and now that thing becomes a problem. It becomes one more sort of thing that's in that landscape that is an island that someone else has to deal with, that's sucking up time, that's redundant to this other thing over there. The procurement office is not led by a digital strategist, right? They don't know that, they bought a CMS, but there's another platform over here that they could have used. Now we have these 2 things, and we're paying a lot of money for all of this, and does it make sense? Make it make sense. So having procurement as a partner and helping ensure that sort of tidiness of the digital ecosystem, I think, is something really valuable to consider. So these are also topics that could probably be full-day workshops, but I will touch on the importance of them briefly. The idea of having standardizing publishing. So a lot of schools have sort of website services. I'm using Yale here as an example in their Yale Sites platform, where if you're the chemistry department or you're a center or whatever, there's a system that's created, it's hosted on a CMS, Yale uses Drupal, and you can create a website that is aligned to brand standards, that works off of a defined design system, that is maintained, and you don't have to sort of hire an agency out to do something. You can focus on using this tool to get your content out there. It's part of the ecosystem, it's aligned to the design system. If something changes, it changes, and you don't have to worry about it. Design system, again, is this Harvard Sites design system. They have a similar platform to Yale. This is not exclusive to Ivy Leagues. I'm just using those 2 because I'm familiar with them, but lots of schools are having really strong documentation and compilation of design systems, which is fantastic. There are definitely some sessions here about design systems at the summit today and tomorrow, but just having that defined helps protect against random things happening and having that ecosystem go awry. And influencing leadership priorities. So this is an example from St. John's University, just down the road. We worked with them on a website project when I was at OHO. And one thing that they managed to do is in the strategic plan, which is the DNA of what the institution is doing next, and what the overall sort of direction is, they managed to create a robust and diverse library of student, faculty, employee, and alumni success stories to highlight on digital platforms and print materials and at high priority/profile events. And there's metrics around completion and publication of profiles. So they had identified storytelling as a critical opportunity for defining the brand and getting that message out there. We built the website around finding ways to sort of put those stories in context across the website. But it wasn't just web people and marketing people doing web and marketing things in a room over here. It was a strategic priority for the university. That carries a lot of weight in terms of making sure that it stays a priority in terms of resources. It stays a priority in terms of recognizing the value of storytelling. So being able to influence, and that's the value of having a VP or CMO of Marcom be at that cabinet level, having those discussions, being part of those discussions around strategic planning to help influence those priorities. So a lot of that old .edu thinking has kind of left a lot of higher ed unprepared for the battles ahead. I think the word of the year is headwinds. I feel like the number of conferences I've been to where it's like the headwinds that higher ed is facing. I'm like, I never heard that word so much before, but I think that one of the things that we can do to sort of be prepared for that is to become more like Voltron. Find the connection points and bring things together in alignment to do great justice. So thank you for listening and being here. I don't know where I'm at in terms of time. I might have time for a question.
I have time for a few questions. Maybe
Question or two, why not? You can just watch Voltron too. Yeah.
I think your last example about St. John's having that in their leadership priorities, do you know how that came about, that got bubbled up all the way to the top, but it made it that far? Like, I think that's kind of...
I think because we had, so the folks that we worked with on the Marcom team, I think had the ear of their vice president, and it's just being able to sort of go up and say, hey, like, helping those leaders see the value of storytelling, why it's important, how it will help advance the brand, and just have people who buy into the value of marketing, right? But I think it's, I think there's lots of schools that have leadership that buys into the value of marketing. But I think it's another thing to say we're going to encode it in this document that really drives the priorities at a resourcing level, right? And so I think it's just taking that a step further and saying, okay, if this is important, we need to really make it important, and being able to, have leadership that buys into that. So I think it's something that happens overnight, but I think it's maybe taking those sort of relationships and the positive outcomes that you've had and leveraging that even strategically a step further to be able to say, let's encode this in the plan for the next 5 years to sort of make sure that it stays a priority and it stays resourced.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You mentioned future-proof your EDU, and I always think of how liquid you need to stay nowadays and how fast, quick technology is. So thinking from like design systems and Yale that you brought up as an example, is there any like design system you specifically recommend or anything like that, or are they just doing it from scratch?
I think the thing that's important when I talk about sort of the future proofing is like once you have something documented, you can change it. Documentation doesn't mean that it's captured in amber and it's immutable forever. If we have a design system and if we say, great, like we have these components and these templates and yada yada. Yeah, so it's like we can then say, okay, well, we actually are going to do more video storytelling because we have that resource and we want to show people our campus. We're in New York City. We want to show them what we've got going on, our amazing location, what our students are doing. Great, we're going to add a new component that really highlights video storytelling. So that's how like a component in the design system can reflect a strategic priority, which ladders up to a part of the brand. And that can change. Like we didn't have that last year, but now we've added it, right? So it's adapting to a new need or new opportunity for the institution. So when you have things documented, you can take things away, you can add things to be able to adjust to.
It doesn't leave an open interpretation. You can refer to if that falls into the card category or something like that. Thank you.
Yep. We're good?
We're good.
All right. Thank y'all.